Hi, guys, and welcome back to Drive to School Chat, where we discuss a subtopic in geography on the way to school. Now, today, I'd like us to talk about the impacts of India's rapid economic growth. Now, we have discussed India's position in terms of their wealth by GDP in the world. And we have previously said that India currently ranks fifth by GDP in the world, but that it continues to make very rapid economic growth, and that by 2050, India is going to be the second largest economy by GDP in the world. So when we talk about development, obviously, we are talking about the way a country progresses or improves socially, economically, and environmentally over time. So India has been developing fairly rapidly. And as a result of that, there are several impacts that I'd like us to discuss and which are in line with our specification and are a requirement for us to know as we go into our examination. So these impacts we will classify into social impacts, and then we'll move on to economic impacts, and then finally we will talk about the environmental impact of that rapid economic growth. All right, let's then begin with the social impact of rapid economic development in India. And the first thing that I'd like us to discuss here is rapid urbanization. Now, obviously, as we have more and more TNCs locating in urban areas in India, they are generating a lot of jobs in those urban areas. And because of that, a lot of people, especially the younger part of the demographic or the population of India, move to those urban areas in search of a better life in terms of education. So, better education, better healthcare, better housing, better jobs, and also higher income. Now, as they do that, obviously, there's that rural to urban migration. And obviously, India has experienced rapid urbanization as a result. Now, let's just define urbanization very quickly because that's another thing that we need to know for our specification. And urbanization is an increase in the proportion of people that live in towns and cities compared to those who live in the countryside. So, the number of people living in towns and cities in India has rapidly increased. In fact, in 1990, only 25% of people in India lived in towns and cities, and that represented around 200 million people in the population. Now, by 2015, that percentage had increased from that percentage had increased to 33%. Now, 33% then implying that by 2015, 400 million people were living in towns and cities or in urban areas, in places like New Delhi, for example. And that obviously, between 1990 and 2015, that's a doubling of the number of people that live in urban areas. So that is quite rapid in terms of growth of people living in towns and cities. Okay, so then moving on to the second social change that has taken place due to rapid economic development, and that is later marriages and falling birth rates. Now, why is that happening then? Why do we have later marriages? Now, we know that as India has continued growing, when we talked about the strategies that the government of India has used to improve to improve development in the country, we mentioned one of them being education, and we said that India provides free education for 6 to 14-year-olds. Now, free education then means that the literacy rates in India have gone up. And those increasing literacy rates then mean that as people get more educated, they are more focused on building a career other than having a family, and especially amongst the women, because the interest rates, not the interest rates, but the literacy rates among the women have actually gone up. So that then implies that if they are having, they are focusing more on a career, then there will be later marriages, and therefore that is leading to lower birth rates. Now, that then leads us to the third social change that has taken place in India. And the third social change is a change in the population structure of India. Now, when we are talking about population structure in geography, we normally look at population pyramids of a country, or the population pyramid of a country. And the population pyramid of India, for example, now has a declining birth rate for the reasons that we've just talked about. So, higher literacy rates leading to later marriages, and therefore a declining birth rate. So the population pyramid of India is beginning to narrow at the bottom. And we also have an increasing economically active part of the population. So the middle of that population pyramid is quite large, and the dependency ratio is lower because of that increasing middle or increasing economically active part of the population. But then in the future, it's important here to mention, in the future, that is likely to change in terms of the dependency ratio. And that is because due to these falling birth rates, it will mean that there will be, there will be a low birth rate, obviously, and then there will be an increase in the number of elderly dependents. And if you have an increase in the number of elderly dependents, that means that, and then a declining economically active part of the population, because it's not being replenished by the birth rates that were high previously, but that have now declined. So as a result of that, we are then going to have a higher dependency ratio in the future. So by 2050, India is likely to have a higher dependency ratio because they will have an aging population. Now, another thing that is very important for us to note here is that due to that large economically active part of the population in India, India currently has got a very large economic window of opportunity. Now, what does that mean? So that means that between the year 2000 and 2050, India will have a very large economically active part of the population, and therefore they can increase and boost their economic growth and take advantage of that economic growth, because by 2050, like we've just mentioned, they are likely to have a higher dependency ratio. They are likely to have a lower number of economically active people and more people that are in the aging population category. So this here at the moment, economic development window in the recent past, where China managed to make very large economic strides as a result of their large population, which was in the economically active category. All right, now let's move on then to the third social change that has taken place in India, and that is cultural change. Now, we have mentioned previously that India, especially in the rural areas, has got a caste system where the society of India is stratified, where you have four social castes, from the very first one, which has the Brahmins, who are like the ruling class of India, and then there is then the Shudras, who are in the fourth caste, which is the last one, and those tend to be the people who are the workers in India. Now, Previously, it was those social castes were very distinct. However, due to the rapid urbanization that we said was the first social change that has taken place, that distinction between the castes is beginning to become eroded. And that is because as people move into those urban areas, they are likely to intermarry between castes. And as a result of that, that part of the culture of India is slowly getting eroded. And that obviously becomes another social change that is taking place as a result of rapid economic development. The last economic change that we will discuss is an improvement in education and health, or healthcare, if you like, in India. Now, we know that as India's economy develops, it means that there will be more investment because the government obviously has a lot more money that is being generated through taxation. And obviously, they are taxing the economically active, and they are also getting money from TNCs. There's also FDI that is coming in, or foreign direct investment, if you like, that is coming in through those TNCs. And as a result of that, it means that the Indian government has money that they can then spend in the education and healthcare system of the country, and especially in the rural areas where those two are not necessarily at par with the urban areas of India. Now, as that happens, obviously, there will then be an increase in the literacy rates, which then means that as we have a more literate population or demographic in India, we will then have a better quality of life for those people that are getting educated. And that's because they can um, access better jobs which are higher paid and therefore have more disposable income. And that disposable income obviously is going to improve their quality of life. Then the other thing that we are talking about here is healthcare. Now, as healthcare improves, and especially in the rural areas that are very remote, where people could not access healthcare previously, then that means that the life expectancy of India is also going to go up. And again, like we mentioned, when we were talking about an aging population, that will also mean if the life expectancy is going up, then there will be more of an aging population, which of course, again, like we had said previously, will present its own challenges because we will be talking about a higher dependency ratio, or a larger number of dependents, because those elderly people will be relying on the economically active for their sustenance. All right. Now let's move on then to the economic changes that have taken place in India. And with the economic change, what our specification requires us to know is the two categories of employees that have emerged in India. And the first one is an increasing middle class. And that increasing middle class is made up of people who work in the higher paid part of the economy. So the ones who work obviously in the urban areas or the urban cores, and the people who and yes, they have the higher paid jobs, so they are a lot more skilled, a lot more educated, and therefore they are doing jobs such as that involve the use of IT. So, for example, IT people that work in IT, university lecturers, doctors, the professionals that you talk about, so lawyers, and we are also talking about managers in global companies. Now, obviously, these people who getting that higher pay will have a good quality of life. So they will have access to better education, for example, for their children, better health care for themselves and their families as well. They will also have access to better housing, and of course their quality of life will be a lot better than the second category that we are going to discuss. And that second category is the low paid part of the population. Now, these people as well work in urban areas. So in the urban cores of India, in places like Mumbai, in places like New Delhi, and so on. But they work, their jobs are not highly paid jobs. And one of the reasons is, as we get a lot more investment by TNCs in India, those TNCs are going there primarily because the wages in India are low. Now, if we compare India to the UK, for example, the minimum wage in India is 87% that lower than that of the UK, right? And we know that those TNCs will not pay the minimum wage. Some of them will pay even lower than the minimum wage because the population in India is very high, and as a result, there are a lot of people who in India who will be willing to work for less than that minimum wage in the country. That then means that the TNCs can reap the benefits of lower wages and therefore increasing their own profit. Now, what does that mean then? That means that there will be a lot of people that are not getting as well paid in India. And then if we compare that then to the earlier category of the emerging middle class that we talked about, then it means that there will be huge inequality in India. Now, while still talking about that lower paid part of the population, we then need to mention that their quality of life is going to be lower. And one of the reasons for that is that when talking about TNCs and the kind of working environment that they create, those people are likely to be working in sweatshops. Now, sweatshops implies that the working conditions are not that great. So they are likely to be working in cramped conditions to begin with. And then those working conditions are also not necessarily that safe. And therefore, in terms of accidents at work and so on, those are likely to be high. And they also are likely not to have health insurance, for example, and other benefits, obviously, that the other category of people that are in the emerging middle class that we talked about would have. So as a result, they then end up with a lower quality of life. And that obviously is propagating disparity within the Indian population. All right, let's move on to the impact of rapid economic development in India. And the first thing that I'd like us to talk about is air pollution. Now, we know that as urbanization takes place, industrialization that is taking place, we then have a lot of people then in those urban areas and a lot of industries in those urban areas, which then increases the amount of air pollution that there is going to be in Indian cities. And that then implies that the air quality in those cities is going to be poor. And we know that if the air quality is going to be poor, then that will have an impact on the health of people in those areas. They are likely to suffer, obviously, from respiratory related diseases. So if we are talking about asthma, then we could talk about lung cancer as well. And obviously, this is a problem, a social problem for the people living there, and also puts a strain on the healthcare system, which then again has implications on the amount of money that the government is going to be spending on healthcare. And some of the recent research actually from 2024 shows that around 9.5% of India's GDP is being spent on trying to deal with the problems that are air pollution related, healthcare problems that are air pollution related, which is quite a large chunk of that GDP. All right, now let's move on then to water pollution. Now, obviously, due to that huge number of people living in those urban areas, there tends to be a lot of water pollution. Now, whether that water pollution is coming from, untreated sewage that is going into the rivers, or whether it's coming from the factories, so industrial pollution as well. And then we can also add another category here, which is industrial pollution. Now, not industrial pollution, excuse me, agricultural pollution, because we know that India does rely heavily on agriculture, and as their population increases as well, they are likely to do a lot more agriculture so as to feed that population, which then means that the amount of pesticides, herbicides that they are using in those farms, fertilizers and so on, will end up draining into the rivers through the water cycle, which then means that those rivers are going to be polluted due to agricultural waste as well. So in terms of water pollution, that has gone up in India, and that then has implications again for people living in India, because obviously they rely on that water for domestic purposes and for drinking and so on, and even for agriculture, for irrigation. And as a result of that, if the water is polluted, then there are likely to be water-related or waterborne diseases. So we have, cholera and typhoid and dysentery and so on that may be water-related. So that again will put strain on the healthcare system in India. All right, so that is air pollution. Water pollution. And then the other thing that we need to mention here is land degradation. Now, land degradation means that the quality of the land is becoming poorer. Now, if we are talking about farming, for example, a lot of farming is likely to be done, and as farming is being done, the soil is not going to be allowed to rest. Because there is a demand for food. And as a result of that, due to having no crop rotation, then that will mean that the soil is going to lose its nutrients. And as the soil loses nutrients, then that means that it will be a lot more susceptible to erosion, whether that is wind erosion or water erosion by water. That then means that there will be increase in desertification. And we do know that India has got, because it's a very large country, so there are areas in India that are semi-arid. Now, semi-arid meaning that they are almost desert. And if then you have a lot more soil erosion, that will imply that you will have a lot more desertification taking place. So those arid areas changing to desert. Now that then means that in terms of crop production or farming and agriculture, that is also going to be impacted. And the other thing we also need to mention here is deforestation. And deforestation obviously is also happening. So the cutting down of trees, it's being done in order to make way for urbanization and also to make way for farming. Now, we know that if there is deforestation, then there is no cover for the soil. And if there is no vegetative cover or vegetation cover for the soil, then again, it's going to be left exposed to the elements. So wind and rain, which then means that erosion rates are also going to go up. And those erosion rates are obviously leading to the desertification that we have talked about. All right. The last environmental impact that we will be discussing is greenhouse gases and climate change. Now, India is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in the world. And obviously, the reason being that India is industrializing very rapidly and also has a very large population. So then you get, pollution from, industry and cars and so on. So the amount of greenhouse gases that India is producing is quite high. Now, what does that mean then? That has an implication where the enhanced greenhouse effect is concerned, and global warming as well. Now, that global warming then will have an impact on India as well, because if it's going to get drier in some areas, then the desertification that we have just discussed is then going to be also going to be exacerbated. And not only that, we are also talking about changing climatic patterns as a result of climate change. And when talking about those, then we are saying that India heavily relies on the monsoon rains. Now, they rely on those rains for their agriculture. And with climate change, there will be changing patterns of that monsoon rain. And if the patterns of change for that monsoon rain are negative, and India does not get as much of the monsoon like they would ordinarily do, then that will impact on the economy, because agriculture then will be impacted by a loss or a reduction in those monsoon rains. All right, so what have we talked about this morning? We have talked about the impact of rapid economic development in India, and we have categorized those under social change. And under social change, we talked about rapid urbanization. Then we talked about later marriages and a declining birth rate, which then led us to talk about a changing population structure or population pyramid. Then we also talked about changing social norms and the culture of India changing. Then we talked about improvements to healthcare and education. Then we moved on to talk about economic change, and we said that economic change is represented by the emerging middle class, which is made up of people who work in higher paid employment. So people who are like IT specialists, people who work as lecturers, and as in managerial jobs in the TNCs, in the global economy, and so on. And then we talked about another category as well, which is of people who work in low paid employment. And those people being a lot of them actually working in sweatshops that have been established by TNCs in India. Then lastly, we talked about environmental change that has taken place in India. We talked about air pollution, water pollution, and then we talked about environmental or land degradation, as well as deforestation. And then eventually, we talked about changes that are being brought about by the enhanced greenhouse effect, which has led to global warming, which then leads to changing climatic patterns, which then impact on India, and especially where agriculture in India is concerned. All right. Thank you very much for joining me on this Drive to School chat and on this journey towards excellent exam results. If you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss on the way to school, please do let me know in the comment section below, and we shall be sure to discuss it one of these fine mornings on our way to school. All the best, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.